They stole my future under the guise of family support, crushed my dreams, and underestimated my resolve. The betrayal cut deep, but I fought back smarter and stronger than they ever expected. This isn't just about money, it's about reclaiming my life. I want to share my story with you. I still remember the moment I saw them staring at my college fund as though it was a secret stash of candy just waiting to be raided. That glare from my father, the calculating look in my mother's eyes like vultures sizing up a fresh kill. I could feel the air in the room thicken, heavy with entitlement and silent demands. It should have been a quiet Saturday morning, but the tension was so sharp I thought it might cut me in half. And right then I realized I wasn't just their son. I was their stepping stone, the invisible stair they planned to climb all the way to the top. Growing up, I was always the one who messed up laundry, forgot birthdays, or spilled my breakfast on the kitchen floor. Every little flub a justification for my parents to sigh and tell me I'd never amount to anything. Meanwhile, my sister Lily, our golden child, could do no wrong. When she skipped class, they bought her an excuse note. When she flunked a test, they hired a tutor. When she flared her temper and smashed her phone against the wall, they told her it was stress. The whole house seemed built around her whims and fragile emotions, and I was just scaffolding, holding it all up. My sacred thing, the thing they were dying to rip away, was more than a pile of cash. It was the promise of escape I had carved out for myself in the wreckage of their favoritism. Every weekend job I squeezed out between classes, every scholarship I hammered into perfection, it all funneled into that fund. It was my plan to leave this house, this toxic circus behind. I could already see myself walking into a dorm lobby with that first tuition check in hand, a backpack full of hope and relief. That vision was real to me, brighter than the sun streaming through my bedroom window. But last week at dinner, the subject came up like a viper uncoiling. Lily sighed, her trademark exasperated sigh, when she discovered her own allowance had run dry. She needed $50 more for her art supplies, which she claimed were vital for her future career. My parents glanced at my college fund with that familiar predator look. My mother even dared to suggest I use my own savings to bail Lily out. "You've got more than enough," she said, lightly tapping the checkbook. My stomach turned. "This is mine," I said, voice tight. My father laughed like I'd cracked a bad joke. "Family helps family," he said, "and you don't need that money now, do you?" His words were a guillotine. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The shock, the indignation, those feelings morphed into something colder, something precise. I realized they assumed I'd just roll over again, but I wasn't their puppet to move around. I took a deep breath and they saw it flicker in my eyes, that spark of defiance they had always tried to snuff out. Lily rolled her eyes at me, indifferent. My mother looked away, unsettled. My father leaned in as if preparing to pounce. But the roles were about to reverse, though no one knew it yet. I spent the next day replaying that dinner scene in my head, in spin, in rewind, in slow motion. Each time I watched my parents' faces tighten, their entitlement shining through like daggers, and Lily, sweet Lily, with her spoiled smile and art supplies, it made me sick. Yet beneath my anger was something else, clarity. For the first time, I saw their hunger for my fund as a weakness, a vulnerability I could exploit. They had taken my childhood, my self-worth, even my name-calling scars. But this money, this fund, it was mine alone, and they would come to regret believing they could touch it without consequence. That night I dreamt of a dark throne room with my family kneeling before me. The walls were lined with cracked mirrors, reflecting every lie they ever told. Lily clutched her empty purse, my mother held a broken check, my father sat powerless on a tattered rug. I stood above them silent, and they looked up, begging. The vision felt real, so real that when my alarm woke me, I blinked against the sunlight, unsure where I stood. In the harsh light of day, the plan started to take shape. I wouldn't confront them directly, not yet. I'd gather proof of their manipulation. I'd trace conversations, dig up old receipts, record phone calls, every shred of evidence that exposed their hypocrisy. Then when the timing was perfect, I'd strike. They wanted to treat me like a cash machine, I'd turn them into beggars. They thought they controlled me, but the puppet strings were about to snap and I'd be the one cutting them. I know the next move has to be flawless. One misstep and they'll twist it, gaslight me, call me ungrateful or unstable. But I'm tired of their games. The golden child might think she's untouchable, my parents might think they're untouchable, but they've underestimated the one thing they never could break, my resolve. And once I set the pieces in motion, they'll learn the cost of playing with a dream that belongs only to me. I never imagined my nightmare would come wrapped in a smiling face. It was a rainy Tuesday when they struck, the day I had planned to deposit a chunk of my fund into the bank, inching me closer to that dorm room door swinging open. I rushed home early, dripping wet, eager to lock that check in my safe. But when I opened my bedroom door, my chest collapsed. The papers were gone, the envelope taped under my desk, the digital transfer proof wiped clean. It was as if the fund never existed. I slammed my door shut behind me, heart hammering. My phone buzzed, a group chat message from Lily. Hey bro, sorry about your fund, I had to use it. Emergency, you know? I stared at her words like they'd been scribbled in acid on my screen. A few seconds later, my mother called. Honey, we borrowed your money for Lily's rent. She's been so stressed, I just couldn't let her fail. Her voice was syrupy, as if she were comforting a child, not confessing a crime. I texted back, you what? No response. Then my father's calm, patronizing tone came through the door. We did the right thing, family supports each other. You'll survive until next semester, won't you? The betrayal stabbed deeper than any physical blow. This money wasn't just cash. It was the sleepless nights I spent juggling shifts at the diner, the refusal to beg for their help, the essays I wrote about escaping their oppressive judgment. Every dollar was a brick in the bridge I was building to my future when they had just torched. I pressed my cold palm against the wall, sliding down to the floor. The rain tapped on the window like mocking applause. I confronted them in the living room, voice raw. Lily sat curled on the couch, headphones dangling around her neck. Her mascara was smudged, eyes wide and innocent. It was rent, okay, I needed it. I snarled, you needed it, you had my money. My mother hovered behind Lily, arms folded. She's your sister, what's a few $100s when her grades tank without a roof over her head? My father leaned against the mantel, shaking his head. Brother, let's be reasonable. You have student loans, you can borrow later. Their words cut me open. They treated me like a backup plan, a safety net they could pull whenever Lily's world threatened to collapse. Their entitlement was suffocating. I tried pleading, bargaining, but they dismissed me with a shrug. You're always so dramatic, Lily said, smirking. My mother nodded. We gave you enough freedom. It's time you learn to manage. Learn to manage? I swallowed, the bile rising in my throat. They'd taken my lifeline and reduced it to a lesson in management. The realization hit me like a freight train. Every apology they'd ever given me, every half-hearted sorry you feel that way, was a lie. They had never valued me. My dreams were expendable. My worth measured only by how useful I could be to their golden girl. That night I lay in bed, the emptiness inside me more tangible than the mattress beneath me. The betrayal thrummed through my veins, mingling with rage and grief. I pictured Lily's smirk, my father's indifference, my mother's condescension. They had crossed a line. They had not only stolen my money, but trampled on my dignity, my years of sacrifice, my hope. I realized then that they saw me as lesser, a conduit to Lily's happiness, not a person with a right to my own life. But as the hours crept by, something unexpected flickered amid the pain, a fierce clarity. Their betrayal didn't just wound me, it revealed them. It showed their true colors, parasites feeding on my ambition. Their entitlement was now laid bare. And with that clarity came resolve. They had weaponized my love and loyalty. I would turn their blade back on them. I sat up in the dark and whispered to myself, they wanted to break me, they're going to regret it. The rain had stopped, but inside me the storm roared on. I would rebuild, yes, but first I would make them pay attention. I'd make them see that I wasn't the puppet they'd always assumed. Their justification, their excuses, had sewn a thread I'd follow straight to the heart of their hypocrisy. They had crossed the line, but lines are meant to be broken. And tonight, that line was the start of my counterstrike. The morning after their betrayal, I wandered through the wreckage of my own life. My room felt foreign, empty desk drawers, a silent safe, the faint echo of all my hard work gone. I moved like a ghost, the emptiness in my chest matching the emptiness on my bookshelf where trophies and books stood as unpaid witnesses. I tried to will myself out of bed to shake off the weight of loss, but every muscle in my body resisted. Even the sunlight spilling through my blinds felt like an insult. I shoved on yesterday's clothes and left the house. The crisp autumn air hit me like a gust of reality. I had no college fund, no clear path forward, no reason to stay here. My part-time shift at the bookstore felt pointless. The orders I placed for textbooks I could no longer afford felt like mocking reminders. My coworkers offered sympathetic nods, but they didn't know the depth of my despair. I wasn't just broke. I was betrayed by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. By the time I trudged home, the familiar outline of my family's house loomed like a fortress built on my ruin. They didn't notice me at first, my father reading the paper, my mother tidying the living room, Lily scrolling on her phone. It was tempting to storm in, to scream, to demand they feel even a fraction of this pain. But something held me back, an ember flickering in the shadows of my mind. I noticed how my father had left his laptop open on the coffee table. On the screen was the family trust document, something I'd never bothered to study, something they'd always assumed I'd never touch. I leaned against the doorframe, heart pounding. A document for the family trust, drafted years ago by my grandfather, was credited as a minor footnote in the lawyer's letter they'd shoved aside. I had paid it no mind until now. I saw a clause, almost buried under legal jargon. If one beneficiary misused trust assets without unanimous approval, the trust could be suspended or redistributed among the remaining heirs. I blinked. That clause was written in black and white, signed by Dad, Mom, and Lily. Signed long before my college fund existed, but the same rules applied. My heart began to race as possibilities exploded in my brain. They had violated the trust's purpose by redirecting funds in bad faith. They had broken a legal covenant, one they had signed off on themselves. This was the key, the chink in their fortress. I looked at my father as he closed the laptop and strolled into the kitchen. They were sitting ducks, patrolling the battlements of a fortress built on shaky ground. I could use the law, their own signature, to dismantle their control. My stomach twisted with excitement. This wasn't about money anymore, it was about power and justice. That night I dove into research. The local law library became my war room. I compiled case studies, precedents, even wrote down statutes that supported my claim. Each paragraph I read fueled the fire inside me. Betrayal could be met with legal consequences. I drafted a formal notice of breach citing specific clauses referencing paragraphs. My hand trembled as I signed my name at the bottom, imagining my parents' faces when they read it. It felt like holding a detonator labeled family hypocrisy. But I needed proof beyond the document. I remembered my mother's habit of logging expenses in that old green ledger she kept in her purse. If I could obtain that ledger, I could trace the transfers, establish a clear timeline proving their malice. I also recalled Lily bragging about dropping in on our accountant just last week, saying she fixed a few numbers. That meant digital records existed, time-stamped and unalterable. Every flash of memory became a building block for my plan. The dawn of realization burst through me. I was not powerless. They had assumed I was too broken, too hurt to fight back. They believed I would retreat, lick my wounds, maybe even leave home defeated. But they had never accounted for one thing, the depth of my resolve. And in their arrogance, they'd handed me the blueprint to their downfall. I sat at my desk that evening, the breach notice printed and waiting. The green ledger lay open beside me, its pages filled with their scribbles and justifications. My phone glowed with an email draft to the family accountant, requesting a full transaction history. I smiled as I typed, "I'm sure you'll want to see these details for yourself." My fingers hovered over send. The plan was precise. Notify them of the breach, demand immediate restitution or face trust suspension, then present the accountant's report as undeniable evidence. The shock on their faces when they realized they'd legally jeopardized everything, Lily's savings account, my sister's car, even my parents' home equity, would be delicious. I leaned back, feeling for the first time in days that my pulse was steady, my mind clear. Their betrayal had cracked their fortress wide open. They thought they owned me. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. The battlefield was set, and I held the advantage hidden in plain sight. Justice was no longer a dream, it was a plan already in motion. I became a ghost in my own home. To them, I was the wounded son who retreated to his room, broken and defeated. I dropped my head at family dinners, mumbled empty apologies, even pretended to avoid my own dreams of college. I let my parents exchange smug glances, thinking they'd permanently clipped my wings. Lily rolled her eyes at every sigh I offered, believing I was too beaten to fight back. That facade of defeat was my greatest weapon. Behind closed doors, my transformation into strategist was relentless. First, I created a hidden folder on my laptop, encrypted and disguised as a game folder, where I cataloged every piece of evidence I'd gathered. Scanned ledger pages, the trust document, email exchanges with the accountant, even voice memos of private conversations my father had foolishly recorded on speaker. Next, I set up a series of digital triggers. Using simple automation scripts, I scheduled emails to be sent at specific intervals, a breach notice to the family lawyer, a formal request for Lily's bank statements, and the final ultimatum to my parents. Each email was drafted with precision, referencing legal statutes and previous acknowledgments from both parents. I tested each trigger, verifying timestamps, ensuring deliverability. They'd walk into the trap blind. While they gloated over my apparent surrender, I recruited a quiet ally, our neighbor, Mrs. Patel, a retired paralegal. I'd helped her carry groceries last spring and she owed me a favor. I slid an envelope under her door, copies of the ledger, the trust, everything. She agreed to serve as a witness and to file my notice of breach under her name so I wouldn't raise suspicion. Her participation was crucial. She could vouch for the authenticity of the documents without implicating me prematurely. I also tapped into Lily's arrogance. She bragged constantly about how easy she had life, how she never worried about money because she had family support. So I fed her small lies, just enough to keep her confident. I Googled her art portfolio site and commented under a pseudonym, praising her latest sketches, encouraging her to invite me to her next gallery show. I nailed down the date and time. That would be the moment I'd unveil the crisis. In the evenings, I casually walked past my father's home office, pretending to be lost. I asked banal questions. "Do you have that spare charger?" and glanced at his cluttered desk. He'd leave the door ajar, trusting me to be defeated. I took mental snapshots of sticky notes, upcoming appointments, travel plans. I learned his routine: morning jog at 6, midday nap after lunch, dinner at 7 sharp. Those details would help me coordinate the final reveal when he was least prepared. Meanwhile, I maintained the performance. I skipped my shift at the bookstore one night claiming exhaustion. My mother fussed over me with herbal tea and sympathy. I let her massage my shoulders, whispering how disappointed she was. Her plates trembled in her hands as she splashed berries on my oatmeal at breakfast. They were feeding me with pity, licking my wounds. All the while, I was sharpening the blade. I even cleaned my room, tidied the desk, fixed the blinds, put fresh sheets on the bed. If they inspected, they'd see no sign of rebellion. I smoothed the wrinkled trust document back into its drawer and cleared the browser history. The hidden folder remained locked and invisible. I erased footprints. My room looked docile, a safe haven for a defeated boy. On the day of the reveal, my heart pounded in my chest with a strange calm. I'd chosen Lily's gallery opening the night she'd asked for more money to expand her brand. She'd never know what hit her. I slipped out of the house under the guise of checking the mail. In the mailbox, I left the final envelope addressed to our family lawyer, with strict instructions to open it at 8 p.m. sharp. At exactly 7:59, I texted Mrs. Patel to confirm the lawyer's receipt, then wandered back inside. My parents were watching TV, Lily sprawled on the couch, sketchbook in hand. I collapsed onto the armchair, eyes distant. My mother huffed, "Are you even listening?" I nodded, defeated. My dad shook his head, muttering, "Poor kid." Then at 8, our phone rang. My mother answered. The voice on the other end was clear and authoritative. "This is Attorney Martin. I'm calling regarding a breach of the Carlyle family trust." My father's shoulders stiffened. Lily looked up, confused. The lawyer began to read clauses referencing dates when parents signed away their own rights if they misused funds. He asked for immediate restitution and threatened suspension of the trust in 30 days unless assets were returned. The room froze. Lily's jaw dropped. My mother's spoon clattered into her cereal. My father's face went pale. They looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. I sat up straight, the victor in my own silent war. The quiet architect had struck and the trap was sprung. I watched them reel from the lawyer's call, but I knew the biggest strike was still to come. The notice of breach had shaken their fortress, but now I needed to lead them straight into my next trap. They thought they'd lost control when that call exposed their hypocrisy. Soon, they'd think they'd regained it. That was the bait. I spent the evening studying their reactions. My mother paced, clutching her phone and whispering apologies to Lily. My father stared at his laptop, brow furrowed, running numbers. Lily sank into the couch, tears in her eyes, whispering, "I can't believe this." Their panic was perfect. I let them stew overnight in a concoction of fear and greed because they believed I was vulnerable, and fear because I'd shown them I had teeth. At dawn, I staged my moment of desperation. I walked into the kitchen, hair disheveled, shoulders slumped, and announced, "I've decided I'm giving up on college. I can't fight this." My voice cracked. My mother gasped and rushed to my side. My father slammed his coffee mug on the counter and growled, "Don't be dramatic." Lily wrapped her arms around me, whispering forgiveness. They bit immediately. My performance was flawless. Over breakfast, I played the grieving brother. I told them I'd pulled my savings to hire a lawyer but realized the cost was too high. I fake-scanned my empty wallet, letting a single tear fall. "I'm sorry," I choked out. My mother's eyes filled with tears, my father's jaw clenched. Lily's panic turned to anger. She accused her parents of forcing my hand. It was beautiful chaos. But it was the next move that sealed their dive into my trap. I needed them to believe they could salvage the situation by returning a portion of the stolen funds, proving their contrition and safeguarding the rest. So I approached them quietly. "Look," I said, voice small, "you must know I'm going to struggle. If you just give back 70% of the fund by tomorrow, maybe we can handle this internally. I'll withdraw the breach notice if you do." My heart pounded, but my face was calm. My mother exchanged a quick glance with my father. He rubbed his chin, then turned to me. 70%, he said slowly. "That's generous. We could manage that." Lily brightened at the thought of her art supplies and rent pages vanishing from her worries. "Yes," she whispered, "that could work." They began calculating how to restructure their savings, which meant digging deeper into the trust before the lawyer's deadline. Exactly what I wanted. I set the terms: a private meeting in the study at 6 that evening, funds in cash, no receipts, just enough proof to satisfy me but not enough to fully repay. "I'll draft an agreement," I told them, "and sign it when I see the money." My mother nodded vigorously, relief washing over her face. My father straightened as if walking back from defeat. They believed they were clever, minimizing the hit, preserving Lily's lifestyle, and cutting me out of the rest. All day I played the defeated son, listless at the bookstore, quiet at lunch, absent at dinner. They drifted around me, lids heavy with guilt mixed with excitement. They'd found a solution. If only I was reasonable, the family could heal. Sometime after work, I slipped to Mrs. Patel's to confirm she was ready to file the permanent suspension once the deadline passed. She grinned, calling me my careful architect. The pieces were aligning. At 6, I ushered them into the study. My father carried a thick envelope. My mother held her purse as if it weighed a ton. Lily hovered, hopeful. I closed the door and placed the envelope on the desk with deliberate slowness. Here's the 70%, my father said. We hope this shows good faith. I nodded and opened it in front of them. Bundles of crisp bills fanned out, a heart-stopping sight. I paused before signing the agreement I'd hastily prepared that morning, one that renounced my rights to any further trust payments in exchange for this cash. Sign here, I said, handing them the pen. They signed without reading, hunger for finality blinding their caution. Lily smiled, reaching toward me. My mother wiped her eyes. My father nodded. They thought they'd outsmarted me by limiting their loss. They had no idea they'd just handed me the final piece I needed. Documented proof of their willingness to negotiate trust assets without full restitution. A confession far more damning than the initial breach. As they stood flush with relief, I closed the folder, slid it into my hidden drawer, and said softly, "Thank you." Their exhausted smiles beamed at me, completely unaware that the real game was about to begin. The bait had taken. Now I waited for the trap to close. That night after they'd left the study triumphant, I sat alone in the dim light of my room. The envelope of cash lay in my desk drawer, a taunting reminder of their greed. I double-checked the final email to Attorney Martin, trigger set for midnight with all evidence attached. The breach notice, the ledger pages, the signed agreement showing their willingness to negotiate trust assets, and the accountant's transaction report. At exactly 12 o'clock, my phone would send it. There was no turning back. I took my place in the living room as Sunday morning sunshine streamed through the curtains. My parents were sipping coffee, relieved. Lily was planning a weekend art binge with her friends. They'd believed the worst was over. I watched their faces, so smug, so sure. They had no idea the collapse was imminent. My phone buzzed. Midnight had passed. The lawyer's office would call any minute. I stood, stretching casually, knocking on the wall as if to check the time. My father glanced up, eyebrows raised. "Something on your mind?" he asked. I shrugged. "Just an early start to the day." At 11:15, the silence shattered. The phone on the side table rang. My mother answered with a cheerful hello. Then her face flickered to confusion as the voice on the other end spoke in that crisp attorney tone. My father joined her, peering over her shoulder. I watched them both freeze, frozen in a frame of disbelief. "Mr. and Mrs. Carlyle," the lawyer said, "I have receipt of an envelope transferring 70% of the trust assets, plus evidence of a deliberate breach. Under Section 4.7 of the Family Trust, any attempt to distribute assets outside of unanimous consent is null and void, and the trust is suspended immediately. Further, the partial restitution agreement you signed is itself evidence of malfeasance." The lawyer continued, reciting clauses and timelines, each word a hammer hitting their sanctuary. "I advise you to arrange a court hearing within 10 days or face full suspension and potential legal sanctions." My father's face drained of color. My mother covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Lily stuttered, What does this mean?" Their world was unraveling around them in real time, and I savored every second. I strode into the room, closing the distance between them like a judge approaching a defendant. "It means you walked right into my trap," I said, voice steady. "You thought you could settle for 70% and move on. You thought I was weak." My parents stared at me, jaws slack. Lily glared, realization dawning. You did this." My voice was calm, almost cold. "I played the broken son. I let you think I had no leverage. You revealed more evidence against yourselves when you signed my agreement." My mother rose, hands shaking. "But we were sorry. We meant to make it right." I shook my head. "Sorry isn't enough. You took everything I worked for and treated me like a means to an end." I lifted the breach notice and ledger scans. "These documents prove the misuse. This signed agreement proves you admitted it. And thanks to the accountant's records, we have the exact timeline showing how you siphoned funds. The only way you salvage anything is to return 100% of the fund by the court date." My father stood, clutching his briefcase. "This is blackmail." I stepped closer, letting the word hang in the air. "No, this is justice." I pulled out the sealed envelope my mother had tucked away, her purse key, and opened it. "I'm returning you your money," I said, placing the bills on the coffee table. "You're welcome to fight it, but remember who holds the evidence." Lily lunged forward, snatching a stack of bills. "You think you're so clever," she screamed. My mother whispered, "Please, let's fix this quietly." I let Lily kick the couch while I stayed calm. "Quietly? You destroyed my future quietly. Now the trust is suspended and everything is frozen until the court decides. You won't bully me into silence anymore." My father tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand. "This stops here. You crossed a line. You're going to rebuild your family without stepping on my dreams." I stepped back, voice softening. "I forgive you if you genuinely commit to restitution and therapy," I said, smiling ironically. "Otherwise, we see you in court." The room was silent except for Lily's ragged breathing. My parents sank onto the couch, defeated. I turned and walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. I won't look back, I said. You had your chance. Then I left, the front door clicking behind me, leaving them in their self-made ruin. Outside, I felt the cool morning air fill my lungs. I'd baited them, trapped them, and revealed the truth in one decisive moment. Their dominance shattered, their hypocrisy exposed, I walked away free, finally free from the shadows of their throne. They'd barely closed the front door behind me when the storm hit. My mother's voice crackled through my phone speaker. "You can't do this," she screamed. I'd expected negotiations, maybe tears. Instead, they lashed out with panic and fury. First, my father called, his voice tight. "You're making a mistake. We'll sue you for defamation. You have no proof your money is in that envelope." I let him rant while I sat in the coffee shop down the street. I sipped my latte and scrolled through the evidence folder on my encrypted phone. Every transaction, every ledger entry, the signed agreement, all time-stamped already. Then Lily texted me, "You're dead to me. I'll tell everyone you're unstable." I watched her message bubble, knowing it'd backfire. I'd already sent anonymous copies to her art program scholarship committee and student housing office, highlighting the legal dispute over family support. If she threatened me, she risked losing her scholarship and campus housing. By midday, their panic turned desperate. My mother emailed our accountant, demanding an emergency meeting to correct the records. The accountant, bound by professional ethics, forwarded her email and my previous request to me. I had CC'd myself on every correspondence. When she arrived at his office clutching a wad of cash, he refused to alter any records. Unbeknownst to her, he'd been recording the meeting the moment she'd offered the bribe. Now I had audio proof of her attempted fraud. They scrambled to hire a high-powered family lawyer. Their first call went to the same attorney who'd served my breach notice. He returned the call with surprising calm. "I'm afraid I'm conflicted," he said. "Your case is solid and I cannot represent you in reversing it." They begged for a referral. He offered to testify against them instead. When that avenue failed, they tried a different tack: public shaming. My mother launched a social media campaign painting me as the ungrateful black sheep. She posted family photos with me tucked in the corner, captions about our son's troubled mind. But I'd anticipated this too. Before the unveil, I'd created burner accounts and preloaded them with photoshopped images depicting her embezzlement from her charity work. As her posts gained traction, replies from my fake profiles demanded accountability for her own misdeeds. The comment threads exploded with rumors about her nonprofit's missing funds. Within hours, she was fielding inquiries from donors and a local news station. In between these attacks, they turned to legal loopholes. They filed injunction motions in a neighboring county, hoping to delay the trust suspension. I'd foreseen this, so I'd already secured an order consolidating all proceedings in our home jurisdiction. Their injunction was dismissed for lack of standing. Next, my father flew to a boutique litigation firm halfway across the state, offering an exorbitant retainer to stall the case indefinitely. I'd anticipated this too, and arranged that the court clerk could reject any filings from firms not pre-approved under the trust's terms. His new attorney's motions were summarily quashed. As their resources dwindled, they tried to pit me against Mrs. Patel, claiming I demanipulated her testimony. My mother sent her tearful letters and handmade cookies, begging for loyalty. But Mrs. Patel handed me the unopened letters and unused cookies with a wink. She'd already signed an affidavit confirming she'd acted only on my documented evidence and remained neutral. Their last stand was a midnight break-in at my room, hoping to steal back any documents they could find. They fumbled with my locked drawer and rifled my desk, only to discover the drawer empty and my laptop already erased. I'd set it to wipe itself if someone entered the wrong password 3 times. A cloud backup held everything, encrypted under a passphrase only I know. They left empty-handed, rattled. By the next morning, they were broken. My mother paced in the living room, tears in her eyes. My father stared at his phone, the realization setting in that every door they tried to open was a wall. Lily hadn't spoken in 2 days, her art supplies lay untouched. I watched their frantic moves from a distance, thermostat adjusted to cool down tensions, half-baked plans to sit down and talk, whispered schemes to transfer assets to a shell corporation. Each plan was dead on arrival, smothered by the very premeditation they'd overlooked. Finally, I called them. "Are you done?" I asked, voice calm. My father's reply was a broken whisper. "What do you want?" I smiled, even though they couldn't see me. "I want peace. Return my money through the proper channels, apologize publicly, and we start family counseling. Otherwise, every $100 you owe will cost you 1,000 in fines and legal fees." Silence, then my mother's voice strained, "Will comply." I hung up and leaned back. Their final scramble had ratified everything I'd set in motion. They declawed at every escape route and found none. In the aftermath, I wasn't just the winner, I was the master of their fate, and for the first time I felt truly free. I asked them to meet one last time in the living room, the same place where they'd once plotted my ruin. They arrived hesitantly, eyes downcast, as if seeing the room for the first time through the haze of their own guilt. Lily sat on the couch, clutching her sketchbook. My mother hovered by the mantel, wiping her eyes. My father slumped in his armchair, suit rumpled from sleepless nights of frantic paperwork. I stood in the center, calm and composed. In my hand was the final settlement agreement, a public apology, a full restitution plan channeled through our family lawyer, and a commitment to therapy sessions for us all. It was a legal and personal blueprint for rebuilding trust, if they dared to follow it. I began, you built walls around me for years. You thought my college fund was just money to be used and discarded. You thought my voice would be silenced, my dreams expendable. You assumed I was powerless, a footstool beneath Lily's ambitions. But you forgot one thing: arrogance blinds you to danger. My father blinked, lips parted, my mother's shoulders trembled. Lily's eyes widened, the sketchbook dropping to the floor with a soft thud. I continued, first you stole what I held sacred. You drained my fund to prop up Lily's art supplies and rent. Then you justified it as family support, convinced me it was my duty to sacrifice. When I confronted you, you gaslit me, told me I was dramatic, ungrateful. You broke a legal covenant you signed yourselves, you crossed the line. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. My family shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering behind their once aloof expressions. I found the flaw in your fortress, the trust's clause on unauthorized distributions. I learned of your ledger records, Lily's boast to the accountant, even your own signature on that agreement you thought was a secret weapon. You taught me your routines, your weaknesses, and your pride. I lifted the folder of evidence. Every step you took to cover your tracks was documented, every excuse recorded, and you walked right into my trap. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears. My father's face went slack. Lily bit her lip, cheeks flushed. I pressed on. You tried threats and bribes, social media smears, secret meetings with sketchy lawyers across state lines. You attempted a midnight break-in to steal back your evidence. You even tried to bribe Mrs. Patel to retract her statements. Every move you made, I anticipated. Each door you tried to open was already locked. Each escape route sealed. My sister's hands trembled around her sketchbook. My parents exchanged haunted glances. This isn't just about money, I said, voice firm. It's about respect. It's about the years of belittling me, the lies you told yourselves to feel better about sacrificing my future. You saw me as a resource, not a person. You used my ambition like a currency and discarded me when you needed a quick fix. My father closed his eyes and shook his head. My mother choked on a sob. Lily's face crumpled. I unfolded the settlement agreement and laid it on the coffee table. Here's the deal. You return every penny of the trust fund through legitimate channels with interest by the end of next month. You issue a public apology, an open letter acknowledging your wrongdoing, and we start family therapy every week for 6 months. If you refuse or if you delay, the full evidence goes public, to the press, to the bank, to the art community, to every scholarship committee you jeopardized. Their stunned silence was deafening. I could almost hear the gears turning in their minds, calculating the fallout. Finally, Lily whispered, "But what about me?" "You'll still have your art supplies," I said, softer now. "You deserve opportunities, but they must come from your talent, not my sacrifice." My mother stood, shaking. We understand." My father remained seated, head bowed. I nodded. "Good, this is your last chance to make things right." I picked up the folder and my briefcase, filled with the copies of every document they'd shredded, every email they'd deleted. I slung it over my shoulder. I faced them one last time. You taught me the power of leverage. You taught me that walls built on lies eventually collapse. You taught me how to fight. My voice softened. Thank you for showing me exactly what I was up against. With that, I turned on my heel. The front door clicked shut behind me. In the narrow crack of the frame, I caught one final, frozen image. My parents and Lily, mouths agape, eyes glazed with the realization that their world had been dismantled by the very sun they'd tried to break. I stepped outside into the crisp morning air, free at last from their shadows. The road ahead was mine, unchained, and the throne of lies behind me lay in silent ruin. Checkmate.